Into storage room C with the rest of the trash.
They're putting it in storage room C. The sentence landed harder than the laughter that followed. I stood at the end of the polished oak table while 12 museum board members looked at the cloth-wrapped sketchbook resting in my hands as though I had brought them a sack of rubbish instead of a gift. Professor Adrian Cole leaned back in his leather chair and adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses. "A donation without provenance," he said. "No documented ownership. No insurance valuation. No exhibition history." His lips curled into a smile. "And our guest believes it belongs in the Renaissance collection." A ripple of amusement circled the room. Someone coughed to hide a laugh. Another didn't bother. Across the table, board chair Eleanor Whitmore folded her hands. "Mr. Rowan," she said politely, "we appreciate your enthusiasm for art. We truly do." The word enthusiasm stung more than an insult. It reduced 30 years of work into a hobby. "I never said it belonged in the Renaissance gallery," I replied calmly. No. Silence. "I said the sketchbook could determine whether half your Renaissance gallery belongs there." The room froze. Then the laughter became louder. Cole slapped the table. "Oh, magnificent." Another trustee shook his head. "Who exactly are you supposed to be?" I looked at every face before answering. "Someone trying to save your museum." Whitmore sighed. "We've spent decades employing the finest authenticators in Europe." "I know. You're suggesting they're wrong?" "I haven't suggested anything." "Then what exactly are you saying?" I placed the wrapped sketchbook gently on the polished table. "Open it." Cole didn't move. Instead, he motioned toward the collections manager. "You do it." The young manager carefully unfolded the faded linen cloth. Inside rested an old leather sketchbook. Its edges were cracked. The spine had nearly separated. Several trustees frowned. One whispered, "This is what caused all the drama." Cole flipped through several pages. Quick charcoal studies. Hand anatomy. Architectural proportions. Pigment calculations. Nothing spectacular to an untrained eye. He closed it with a snap. "A student's notebook. No. A workshop copy. No. A fake. No." His smile widened. "Then tell us." I met his gaze. "I won't." His expression hardened. "You refuse." "I donated it." "Yes. It belongs to the museum now. So, you're free to decide its value." The room became strangely quiet. Whitmore narrowed her eyes. "You're serious?" "Yes." "You won't explain?" "No." Cole laughed again. "I've never met anyone this arrogant." "Neither have I." His smile disappeared. Whitmore finally stood. "The museum formally accepts the donation." She nodded toward the collections manager. "Catalog it." Cole added casually. "Storage room C is sufficient." Another trustee chuckled. "No need to waste conservation funds." The sketchbook disappeared into an archival box. No one noticed the tiny pause before I released it. No one asked why I smiled. No one wondered why I hadn't argued. As I walked toward the conference room door, Whitmore called after me. "Mr. Rowan." I stopped. "If your mysterious notebook truly contains something extraordinary." She waited. "Then you've made a mistake giving it away." I looked back only once. "No." I smiled politely. "You have." Rain coated the museum steps. Journalists crowded outside another entrance, waiting for the unveiling of Masters of Light, the museum's largest Renaissance exhibition in decades. Banners covered the building. Sponsors had invested millions. Collectors had flown in from 6 countries. Inside those galleries hung paintings insured for over £1 billion. Everyone celebrated. I walked down the stone staircase without looking back. My phone vibrated. "Nathan." I answered. "How did it go?" They laughed. He sighed. "I expected that." "So did I." "And the sketchbook?" "In storage." There was a long silence. "They actually stored it?" "Yes." Nathan laughed softly. "They really have no idea." "No." "When will they realize?" "They already had their chance." "You're not going back?" "No." "You're just going to watch?" "Yes." He hesitated. "You spent 15 years protecting their reputation." "I know." "You built half the authentication reports hanging in that building." "I know." "They erased your name from every publication after Adrian became director." "I know." "They told everyone you retired because you couldn't keep up." "I heard." "And now you're letting them bury the only evidence that can expose everything?" I stopped beneath a street lamp. Rain tapped softly against my umbrella. "They buried themselves," I said quietly. "I simply stopped digging them out." Nathan didn't answer immediately. Finally, he whispered, "You knew they'd reject it." "Yes. You planned this. I prepared for it. You're frightening sometimes." "No." I watched the museum lights glowing through the rain. Only patient. 3 days later, the museum opened its exhibition. Every newspaper praised it. Television crews broadcast live. Collectors applauded. Professor Adrian Cole stood before cameras, proudly declaring the exhibition the most thoroughly authenticated Renaissance collection assembled this century. I turned off the television before he finished speaking. Then someone knocked on my front door. The knocking wasn't hurried. It was measured. 3 taps. A pause. 2 more. Only one person I knew knocked like that. Nathan stepped inside carrying a folded newspaper under one arm and a cardboard tray with 2 coffees. "You haven't looked." "I don't need to." He unfolded the newspaper anyway. Across the front page was Adrian Cole, smiling beneath the museum's newest acquisition, the exhibition that redefined Renaissance art. Nathan tossed the paper onto my dining table. "They're celebrating already." "They're early." "You sound certain." "I am." He studied me carefully. For years, Nathan had been my assistant in the museum's conservation laboratory. Quiet, meticulous, impossible to intimidate. When Adrian became chief curator, Nathan had watched as my reports were reassigned, my discoveries published under other names, and my objections quietly edited out of official records. "You could still stop this," he said. "I could." "You won't." "No." "Why?" I poured coffee into 2 mugs before answering. "Because truth that is forced becomes an argument, and truth discovered becomes undeniable." Nathan looked toward the shelves lining my study. They weren't filled with paintings. They held notebooks, hundreds of them. Every pigment analysis, every fiber sample, every microscopic comparison I'd made over 3 decades. No headlines, no awards, only records. "The sketchbook wasn't your only evidence," Nathan said softly. "It never was." "Then why give it away?" "Because they believed they were rejecting me." "But they were rejecting the one question they should have asked." Nathan frowned. "What question?" "Who drew those sketches?" Before he could answer, the doorbell rang again. This time it was frantic. I opened the door to find a woman in a navy suit, soaked despite the clear afternoon. She held up an identification badge. "Oliver Rowan." "Yes. My name is Claire Donovan, insurance investigator." Her breathing was uneven. "I apologize for arriving unannounced." "You'd better come in." Nathan silently placed another cup on the table. Claire remained standing. "I've just come from Ashcroft Museum." My expression didn't change. "I see. There has been a complication." Nathan almost smiled. "What kind of complication?" Claire hesitated. "One of your former colleagues requested an emergency insurance review." "Professor Cole?" She blinked. "How did you know?" "He only asks for help after he's convinced himself he doesn't need it." Claire stared. "You know him well." "I used to." She opened a leather folder and removed several enlarged photographs. Paintings, frames, close-ups of brushstrokes, crack patterns, pigment samples. "Someone submitted an anonymous report this morning," she said. "It claims 8 major works in the exhibition cannot possibly originate from the artists attributed to them." Nathan looked at me. I remained silent. Claire continued. "The report references construction methods that weren't publicly documented." She slid another page across the table. "There are also page numbers." Nathan recognized them immediately. "The sketchbook." Claire nodded. "The anonymous report claims every inconsistency can be verified by studying the notebook donated 3 days ago." Silence settled over the room. She finally asked the question no one at the museum had bothered to ask. "Mr. Rowan, did you write it?" "No." "Then who did?" I looked through the window toward the city skyline. "The man who trained the workshop everyone believes painted those masterpieces." Claire frowned. "That makes no sense." "Because history forgot his name." Nathan leaned forward. "You're talking about Matteo Bellini." Claire's eyes widened. "That artist never existed." I looked at her. "That," I said quietly, "is exactly what they're about to discover." Before anyone spoke again, Claire's phone rang. She answered. Her face drained of color within seconds. "What?" She listened. "No." Another pause. "Don't let anyone leave the gallery." Nathan slowly stood. Claire lowered the phone with trembling hands. "They've just taken one of the paintings off display." "Why?" She swallowed. "A conservator found fresh charcoal marks beneath the varnish." Nathan whispered. "Impossible." I shook my head. No. I reached for my coat. Only if you believe the forgery was finished. Outside, distant sirens echoed through the city as the museum's celebration began to unravel. The museum steps no longer welcomed guests. They trapped them. Police barriers stretched across the entrance where photographers had stood only hours earlier. Reporters shouted over one another while television cameras swung toward every official walking in or out of the building. The museum has no comment. Please stand back. An internal review is underway. Every sentence fed the crowd's hunger. I stood across the street beneath the awning of a closed bookshop. Nathan watched the chaos with folded arms. They've locked the galleries. They have. They're already panicking. Not yet. He looked at me. If this isn't panic, what is? I nodded toward the entrance. Watch Professor Cole. Adrian emerged through the revolving doors surrounded by trustees. He smiled. He even waved at the cameras. His confidence never reached his eyes. The exhibition remains open, he announced. There is no evidence of forgery. One reporter shouted. Then why remove St. Jerome? A routine conservation review. Another voice cut through the noise. Did an anonymous report identify 8 questionable paintings? Cole's smile stiffened. The museum does not respond to rumors. He disappeared back inside before another question reached him. Nathan exhaled slowly. He's lying. Yes. He knows. No. Nathan frowned. What? He knows something is wrong. I watched the doors close behind Cole. He still believes he can control it. Inside the museum, the atmosphere had changed completely. Claire's temporary investigator's pass carried us through security without a word. The celebration banners remained. The orchestra had stopped playing. Champagne glasses still stood on silver trays, abandoned where guests had left them. In Conservation Laboratory 2, 6 experts surrounded St. Jerome. Ultraviolet lamps flooded the painting with pale violet light. Cole stood beside the easel. His face tightened the moment he saw me. I didn't invite him. Claire answered calmly. I did. Cole laughed bitterly. Wonderful. He pointed directly at me. The amateur returns. I donated a notebook. You delivered a stunt. I delivered evidence. You delivered confusion. I said nothing. One conservator cleared his throat. Professor. Cole ignored him. I've spent 25 years authenticating Renaissance paintings. I know. You expect me to believe one forgotten notebook overturns decades of scholarship? No. His eyebrows rose. I expect the paintings to. The room fell silent. A young conservation scientist looked nervously between us. Professor. What? We've found something. She projected magnified images onto a large monitor. Thousands of tiny charcoal particles appeared beneath the painted surface. Cole folded his arms. Transfer marks. No. Underdrawing. No. She hesitated. They're fingerprints. The room froze. Fingerprints. Cole repeated. She nodded. Embedded in unfinished charcoal. Impossible. Normally, yes. She zoomed further. Every ridge appeared astonishingly clear. Claire looked at me. You've seen this before. Many times. Cole stepped toward the monitor. What does it prove? I answered quietly. That the drawing was altered. He scoffed. Every workshop altered drawings. After the charcoal was fixed. I walked closer. This one wasn't. The scientist swallowed. He's correct. Cole rounded on her. Are you questioning my expertise? No, Professor. Then explain. She took a breath. The charcoal should have smeared during painting. It didn't. Exactly. Meaning? She looked at me before speaking. Someone reopened the painting centuries later. Every face in the room changed. Whitmore entered moments later. She looked exhausted. The insurance consortium has suspended coverage. Cole stared. They can't. They already have. She handed him a letter. He read it once. Then again. Color drained from his face. Effective immediately, he whispered. Nathan leaned toward me. That's over 800 million pounds. Closer to 1 billion. Without insurance, the exhibition could not legally remain open. Visitors were quietly escorted outside. Doors closed. Security locks engaged. For the first time in its history, Ashcroft Museum stood empty during opening week. Whitmore turned toward me. Mr. Rowan. Chairwoman. I owe you an apology. You owe yourself honesty. Her shoulders lowered. Tell us what you found. I haven't found anything. She stared. I stopped looking years ago. Cole slammed the letter onto a table. Enough riddles. He pointed toward me again. If you know something, say it. I already did. You've said nothing. I donated everything. His breathing grew heavier. That notebook contains codes. No. Hidden messages. No. Then why won't you explain it? Because explanation isn't evidence. He took one step closer. What does that even mean? It means if the truth depends on my words. I looked around the laboratory. Then you can call me a liar. Nobody answered. Claire's phone vibrated. She read the message. Then another. Then another. There are 3 more reports. Whitmore looked up. From whom? Private collectors. What about them? They're demanding immediate reviews of every painting Professor Cole authenticated over the last 6 years. Silence crushed the room. Nathan whispered. It has started. The emergency board meeting lasted nearly 4 hours. I wasn't invited. Neither was Nathan. Claire walked in and out carrying files while lawyers occupied every available chair. From the corridor, raised voices drifted through the closed doors. You signed those certificates. We relied on expert opinion. Insurance will sue us. This cannot leave the room. At one point something shattered against a wall. Nathan glanced toward the sound. Glass. No. What? A career. Near midnight, Whitmore finally emerged. She looked 20 years older. Mr. Rowan. I stood. We need your help. I already helped. We need more. She hesitated before continuing. The board has voted to reopen your consultancy. I retired. We'll restore your position. I never lost my ability to work. We'll restore your publications. They're already written. We'll issue a public apology. I don't need one. Her voice softened. What do you want? I looked through the laboratory window where conservators still examined St. Jerome. The truth. We're trying. No. I met her eyes. You're trying to survive. She couldn't deny it. Cole stormed into the corridor before she could answer. You are not negotiating with him. Whitmore turned sharply. We have no choice. We absolutely do. He pointed toward me again. He's manipulating all of us. Nathan finally spoke. No. Cole glared. You stay out of this. Nathan didn't move. For 15 years Oliver corrected your reports before publication. Cole's face hardened. Watch yourself. I watched long enough. The corridor became silent. Nathan continued. You published his pigment research under your own name. Cole laughed. Prove it. Nathan reached into his satchel. I can. He placed 3 weathered notebooks onto a nearby table. Cole's smile faded. I kept copies. Whitmore stared. You knew? Nathan nodded. I hoped I'd never need them. Cole lunged toward the notebooks. I stepped between them. You've taken enough. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then Cole slowly lowered his hand. You planned this. No. You've been waiting. Yes. His voice cracked. You wanted me destroyed. I shook my head. I wanted you to stop. He looked genuinely confused. When? The first report. The second. The 20th. When you removed my name. When you dismissed every conservator who disagreed with you. When expertise became less important than applause. His shoulders sagged. For the first time since I'd met him, Adrian Cole looked frightened rather than proud. Claire hurried down the corridor carrying another sealed envelope. She stopped beside Whitmore. This just arrived from Florence. Whitmore broke the seal. Inside lay a single sheet and an old black and white photograph. She handed both to me. The photograph showed 4 conservators standing around an unfinished Renaissance panel. One man held an unmistakable leather sketchbook beneath his arm. The same cracked spine. The same brass clasp. Whitmore frowned. Who's that? I recognized him instantly. My grandfather. Nathan looked at me in disbelief. You never told me. No one asked. Claire unfolded the accompanying letter. Its final sentence was written in careful Italian. The sketchbook belongs to the Rowan family because they never stopped protecting the truth after the rest of us chose convenience. Whitmore whispered. So the donation was never about giving away a notebook. I finished. It was about returning evidence to the place that should have protected it. Before anyone could respond, alarms erupted throughout the museum. Red emergency lights flashed across the corridor. A security guard's voice echoed over the public address system. All conservation staff report immediately to Gallery 1. Nathan's expression changed. What's happened now? A terrified conservator ran around the corner, barely able to breathe. They're gone. Whitmore caught her shoulders. What is? The authentication files. What files? Every original report Professor Cole submitted over the last 6 years. She looked directly at him. The archive cabinets are empty. Cole's face turned completely white. The silence after the alarm was louder than the siren itself. No one moved. No one breathed. Professor Adrian Cole was the first to recover. "Seal the building," he shouted. "Nobody leaves." Security guards sprinted in different directions. Within seconds, every entrance was electronically locked. The museum had become its own prison. Gallery 1 looked untouched. Masterpieces still hung beneath carefully positioned lights. Glass display cases reflected the flashing emergency strobes. Only one thing was missing: the archive trolley. It normally held authentication files waiting to be digitized. Now it stood empty. Claire crouched beside it. No signs of forced entry. Nathan examined the lock. It was open normally. With whose access? A security officer hurried over carrying a tablet. "We've checked the electronic log." He hesitated. Whitmore frowned. "Well." The cabinet was opened using Professor Cole's credentials. Every head turned. Cole laughed once. A sharp, humorless sound. "Ridiculous. The system doesn't make mistakes. My access card hasn't left my pocket." The officer looked uncomfortable. "The system shows 2 separate entries. Impossible. One this morning. And the second." He swallowed. 43 minutes ago." Cole snatched the tablet. "I was in the boardroom." Claire folded her arms. "Were you?" A trustee answered before Cole could. "He never left." Another nodded immediately. "He was with us." The officer looked confused. "Then someone duplicated your credentials." Cole looked ready to explode. "This is sabotage." No one argued. The question was only one of direction. I remained near the gallery entrance. Nathan stepped beside me. "You haven't said a word." "There isn't one worth saying." "You know something." "I know people." He followed my gaze. A junior registrar stood alone near the staircase. Sweat covered his forehead despite the cold marble hall. His hands shook. "You're watching, Daniel." "Yes." "The registrar?" He catalogued my sketchbook. Nathan looked again. Daniel avoided everyone's eyes. His breathing grew faster every time someone mentioned the missing files. Nathan whispered, "You think he stole them?" "I think he's terrified." "Of getting caught." "No." I watched Daniel clutch his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Of disappointing someone." Claire approached Daniel first. "Mr. Harris." He flinched. "Yes." "You handled Mr. Rowan's donation." "Ah, yes." "Where is the sketchbook now?" "In storage room C." "You've checked?" "This morning." "Take us there." Daniel hesitated. Only for a heartbeat. Then he nodded. "I'll get the keys." He turned too quickly, almost running. Nathan noticed it too. "He's scared." "Yes." "But not of us." Storage room C occupied the oldest section of the museum. The temperature dropped noticeably as we descended the stone staircase. Rows of compact shelving stretched into darkness. Each aisle contained thousands of forgotten objects. Boxes, frames, fragments of history, things once considered important. Daniel unlocked the heavy steel door. "It should be." He looked around. "There. Shelf C, 19. The archival box remained exactly where it had been placed. Untouched. Claire photographed the seal before opening it. Inside rested the leather sketchbook. Exactly as I had left it. Cole crossed his arms triumphantly. "There." He looked directly at Whitmore. "Can we stop pretending this notebook is magical?" I ignored him. Instead, I looked at Daniel. "You opened it." His eyes widened. "No, you did. I swear. You opened it yesterday." His breathing stopped. No one else had noticed. But I had. The linen wrapping had been folded differently. Only by a fraction. Only enough for someone who wrapped thousands of objects every year to recognize. Daniel's voice trembled. You were curious." He lowered his head. "I only looked for a minute." Cole stepped forward. "Why?" Daniel looked at the floor. I couldn't understand why someone would donate something without explaining it. "And I found." His voice broke. "A loose page." The room stiffened. Claire immediately looked inside the sketchbook. One binding thread hung broken. A page had indeed been removed. Nathan closed his eyes. "So that's it." Whitmore stared at Daniel. "Where is it?" "I don't know." "You took it?" "No. You just admitted." "I found it loose." He was almost crying now. I handed it to Professor Cole. Every face slowly turned. Cole blinked. "What?" Daniel pointed with a shaking finger. "You said you'd examine it privately." "I never." "You told me not to record it." "You liar." Daniel's shoulders collapsed. I thought you were protecting the museum." Cole's expression darkened. I've never seen that page. Daniel looked utterly broken. You told me nobody else needed to know. Enough. You promised to catalog it yourself. I said enough. His voice echoed through the storage room. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then I quietly asked, "What was on the page, Daniel?" He closed his eyes. "A list." "What kind?" "Painting dimensions." Nathan frowned. "Only that." "And?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Small symbols beside each title." My pulse remained steady. Exactly as expected. Whitmore looked from Daniel to me. "You recognize those symbols?" "Yes." "What did they mean?" "They weren't signatures." Claire answered before I could continue. "They were workshop marks." I nodded. Every apprentice used a different geometric mark. Cole laughed dismissively. "That's basic Renaissance history." "No," I replied. "That's what history believes." The room fell silent again. The marks weren't assigned to apprentices. I looked at the sketchbook resting in Claire's hands. They identified restorations. Nathan's eyes widened. Not original paintings, but paintings altered decades later. Whitmore slowly understood. If someone knew those symbols, they could identify every modified work in Europe. Claire finished my sentence and expose every false attribution built on those restorations. No one looked at Cole. They didn't have to. A security guard rushed downstairs. "We found CCTV. Claire turned immediately. "Show us." Within minutes, we stood inside the museum's surveillance office. Footage from the previous evening filled 6 monitors. Daniel appeared first. He entered storage room C, removed the sketchbook, opened it, exactly as he'd admitted. Then another figure entered. Professor Cole. He dismissed Daniel with a wave. The young registrar left. Cole remained alone. Everyone watched in complete silence. He carefully removed a folded page from the sketchbook. Nathan whispered, "There." Cole examined it for nearly 3 minutes. Then, instead of returning it, he slipped it inside his own leather portfolio. The recording continued. Cole switched off the storage room camera. The screen went black. Nobody spoke. When the recording resumed 7 minutes later, he had already left. Claire slowly turned toward him. "You said you'd never seen the page." Cole's lips parted. No words came. Whitmore's voice was colder than the marble floor. "Where is it?" Cole recovered enough to straighten his tie. "I destroyed it." Nathan stared at him. "You what?" "It contained unverified notes. It contained evidence. It contained speculation. It threatened the museum." "It threatened you," I said quietly. Cole's jaw tightened. "You don't understand leadership." "No, I understand stewardship." He looked away. Another officer entered the surveillance room. "We've identified the missing authentication files." Claire looked up. "Where?" "They weren't stolen." "What?" "They were transferred." "Transferred where?" The officer hesitated. "To Professor Cole's private off-site archive." Whitmore's face hardened. "You kept museum records in your own storage facility?" Cole finally snapped. "I had to." "Why?" "Because none of you understood what was at stake." Nathan took one slow step toward him. "What was at stake?" Cole looked exhausted. "My life's work." I answered before anyone else could. "No." I met his eyes. "Your reputation." His shoulders slumped for the first time. Not in anger. In surrender. "I corrected them," he whispered. "What?" "The paintings." Everyone frowned. "I improved their histories." Claire stared in disbelief. "You fabricated provenance." "I created certainty." "You invented ownership records." "I protected collections." "You forged scholarship." "I saved museums." His voice cracked under the weight of his own justification. For years he had convinced himself that every lie served a greater purpose. Now, standing before the very evidence he had tried to bury, even he seemed unsure whether he believed it anymore. Outside the surveillance office, the distant roar of reporters grew louder. The news had already begun to spread. Someone had leaked the story, and by morning, the entire art world would know that Ashcroft Museum's greatest triumph had become its greatest scandal. By sunrise, the crowd outside Ashcroft Museum had tripled. Satellite vans lined the street. International news agencies had arrived before the museum staff. The headlines had already chosen their language. Billion-pound collection under investigation. Authentication scandal rocks Europe. Who decided what was real? No one asked about me. Not yet. That suited me. Inside the museum, every conference room had become an interrogation room. Lawyers occupied one. Insurance investigators another. Government cultural officials claimed the largest chamber. Claire walked beside me through corridors that had once displayed confidence. Now they displayed fear. Employees avoided eye contact. Conservators whispered in corners. Junior curators quietly removed exhibition catalogs from the gift shop shelves. History was rewriting itself in real time. Nathan carried 3 archive boxes. They've requested your notebooks. They're ready. You aren't worried? I've already lost everything they could take. He looked at me for a long moment. You really mean that? Yes. The Cultural Heritage Commission assembled around a circular table. Unlike the museum board, they didn't laugh. They listened. Commissioner Helen Graves adjusted the microphone. Mr. Rowan. Commissioner, you've declined employment with the museum. I have. You've declined consultancy fees. Yes. You've refused compensation. I don't need payment to tell the truth. She nodded once. Then tell us where this began. The room became still. I placed my oldest notebook on the table. Its leather cover had faded almost white. I'd like to begin with a mistake. Graves looked surprised. Yours? No. I opened the notebook. Inside were pigment charts dated 28 years earlier. A younger conservator's handwriting filled the margins. Mine. This painting. I slid a photograph across the table. The Martyr's Window. One commissioner leaned closer. It was authenticated by Professor Adrian Cole. No. It was authenticated by me. Silence. Graves frowned. His signature appears on the certificate. Not originally. I removed another document. The first draft. My signature remained clearly visible beneath the analysis. Then I placed the museum's published certificate beside it. My name had disappeared. Cole's had replaced it. No edits. No explanation. Only substitution. Nathan quietly placed 6 more folders onto the table. Each contained the same pattern. Original report. Published report. Different signature. One commissioner whispered. How many? Nathan answered. We stopped counting after 87. The room fell silent. The door opened. Professor Adrian Cole entered accompanied by 2 solicitors. He looked immaculate. Fresh suit. Fresh tie. Fresh confidence. But his eyes no longer belonged to the man who had mocked me 3 days earlier. They belonged to someone trying to outrun a tide. His solicitor spoke first. My client disputes every allegation. Graves nodded. He'll have the opportunity. Cole looked directly at me. You planned this. No. You preserved it. Yes. You kept records for decades. I kept the truth. His smile returned, thin and sharp. And now you expect them to believe you over me? I expect them to read. Graves gestured toward the evidence. They already are. Cole requested permission to question me directly. The commissioners agreed. He stood. When did you decide to destroy me? I didn't. You donated that notebook knowing it would create doubt. I donated it because it belonged here. You wanted this investigation. I wanted a question. What question? I held his gaze. Why did the museum stop asking for proof? The commissioners exchanged glances. Cole laughed quietly. You've always hidden behind philosophy. No. I hid behind reports. You resent me. I pitied you. His smile vanished. You think you're better than me? No. I think evidence is. He suddenly picked up my notebook. You claim this proves everything. It proves enough. It proves nothing. Without warning, he tore a page free. The sound echoed through the chamber. Nathan lurched forward. Adrian. Security moved immediately. Claire stepped between us. Cole held the torn page in the air. There. He smiled desperately. Now it's incomplete. I remained seated. He waited for anger. For outrage. For panic. Instead, I folded my hands. Finished. His expression faltered. That's all. Yes. You don't care? I expected it. Nathan slowly reached into another archive box. He removed an identical notebook. Then another. Then a digital tablet. Then a hard drive. Claire looked at Cole. He made copies. Nathan shook his head. No. He smiled faintly. He made originals. Cole stared in confusion. What? Oliver, the quiet man they had dismissed for years, finally answered. I never trusted memory. The hearing resumed after a brief recess. No one looked at Adrian Cole the same way. Not because he had torn a notebook page. Because everyone now understood why he had done it. An innocent man protects evidence. A guilty man destroys it. Commissioner Graves requested the museum's digital archives. Within minutes, technicians projected thousands of internal emails onto a large screen. Search terms narrowed the results. Authentication. Urgent. Revision. Signature. One message appeared, then another, then dozens more. Most involved routine discussions. Until Nathan quietly spoke. Search my name. The technician did. A private email surfaced immediately. From Adrian Cole. To the museum's publishing department. Remove Nathan Ellis from the conservation paper. His contribution is administrative only. Nathan lowered his eyes. I designed the entire testing protocol. Graves looked at another commissioner. Continue. Another email. Oliver Rowan's conclusions are unnecessarily cautious. Publish the stronger attribution. Another. Do not circulate Rowan's draft outside senior management. Another. The donor will withdraw funding if we delay certification. Proceed. No one in the room spoke. They simply read. Lie after lie. Pressure after pressure. Choice after choice. Cole had never forged a masterpiece with paint. He had forged certainty. Claire stood. I have additional evidence. She placed the missing page from the sketchbook onto the table. The room froze. Cole's eyes widened. You said. I destroyed it. Claire interrupted. You wanted us to believe that. She turned toward the commissioners. Professor Cole attempted to burn this page in his office fireplace. She unfolded a transparent evidence bag. The paper only scorched along one edge. Nathan smiled for the first time in days. You recovered it. The cleaning staff reported unusual ash. She looked at me. I remembered what you said. Truth discovered becomes undeniable. I nodded. The page itself looked ordinary. Names. Measurements. Tiny geometric symbols. Nothing dramatic. Until Commissioner Graves placed it beside high-resolution photographs of the disputed paintings. One triangle matched. Then a circle. Then a cross. One after another. Every symbol aligned perfectly. The room watched history reorganize itself. Not because I explained it. Because the evidence did. Whitmore stood slowly. Her voice trembled. I owe this museum an apology. No one interrupted. I spent years believing reputation protected truth. She looked around the chamber. It doesn't. It protects power. She turned toward me. Mr. Rowan. No. She stopped. You don't owe me. I ignored your warnings. You ignored your own experts. Tears filled her eyes. Is there any way to repair this? I looked through the tall windows toward the public square outside. People were still waiting. Not for a scandal. For answers. Yes. Everyone waited. Stop asking who deserves to be believed. I looked back at the commissioners. Start asking what deserves to be verified. Commissioner Graves rose. The commission has reached its preliminary decision. Every chair became still. Professor Adrian Cole. She paused. Your accreditation as a senior authenticator is suspended with immediate effect. He closed his eyes. Pending criminal investigation. His shoulders sagged. All certifications issued solely under your authority are revoked. His solicitor whispered something urgently. Cole didn't respond. Ashcroft Museum will undergo an independent review. Another pause. And Mr. Oliver Rowan is invited. Not appointed, not employed, but invited to assist solely under conditions he determines. Graves looked at me. You owe this institution nothing. I nodded once. I know. Security approached Adrian Cole. He didn't resist. As they escorted him toward the exit, he stopped beside me. I spent my life trying to make people believe. His voice was barely audible. And you? I watched the morning light spill across the chamber floor. I spent mine making sure they never had to. He lowered his head. For the first time since we'd met, he had nothing left to argue. Nothing left to defend. Nothing left to borrow. Only the consequences of every decision he had made. Outside, the museum doors opened once more. Not for an exhibition, but for the investigators who would spend months uncovering everything that had been hidden. The reporters found me before I reached the front gate. Mr. Rowan, did you know the collection was fake? Are there more forged paintings? Will you replace Professor Cole? Camera shutters fired in relentless bursts. Microphones crowded toward my face. For years I had entered this building through side entrances. Invisible. Useful only when something difficult needed solving. Now strangers wanted answers. I kept walking. Mr. Rowan. One young journalist matched my pace. People deserve to know. They do. Then why won't you speak? I stopped. The crowd immediately fell silent. I spent 30 years speaking. Confused expressions spread through the group. No one listened. I continued toward the waiting taxi. This time no one followed. 3 weeks later, the museum remained closed. Not because investigators demanded it, because thousands of objects required fresh examination. Every certificate, every restoration, every acquisition. Nothing would be accepted simply because a respected name appeared beneath it. That alone felt like progress. Nathan unlocked the door to a neglected warehouse on the eastern side of the city. Dust floated through shafts of afternoon sunlight. Broken shelving lined the walls. The roof leaked in 2 places. It doesn't look like much. It isn't. He smiled. Yet. I walked slowly across the concrete floor. This used to be a printing workshop. The owner retired. The lease. Nathan held up a folder. Signed yesterday. I looked around again. The silence inside the building felt different from the silence inside museums. This one invited work, not prestige. What do you think? He asked. I rested a hand on one of the old wooden benches. It doesn't need to impress anyone. He grinned. Exactly. A week later, volunteers began arriving. Not famous experts. Not wealthy collectors. Students. Retired conservators. Independent historians. A carpenter. A photographer. Even a chemistry teacher who specialized in historical pigments. No interviews. No hierarchy. Only one question. What can you do? Every answer mattered. Claire arrived carrying 2 large boxes. I brought something. What is it? She placed them on a table. Inside were dozens of evidence-grade microscopes scheduled for replacement by her department. They're still perfectly functional. You don't have to donate these. I know. She smiled. I want to. Nathan laughed. Looks like we're becoming a laboratory. No. I carefully unpacked the first microscope. We're becoming a place where questions are welcome. The name came almost by accident. One of the students painted temporary lettering across the entrance. The Open Atelier. Nathan tilted his head. Simple. It should be. What if people expect a museum? They won't find one. What will they find? I looked through the open doors. Long tables. Natural light. Reference books. Microscopes. Conversations. They'll find the work before the reputation. The first object examined wasn't worth millions. It wasn't even valuable. A local family brought an old landscape inherited from a grandfather. Every auction house had dismissed it. Every dealer had ignored it. The elderly woman who carried it apologized before unwrapping the canvas. I'm sorry for wasting your time. I smiled. You're not. She hesitated. It probably isn't important. Everything deserves an honest look. Nathan examined the canvas. Claire prepared the camera. One of the students recorded observations. No one rushed. No one pretended certainty. 2 hours later, we reached our conclusion. It isn't by the famous painter your family hoped for. The woman nodded sadly. I expected that. But, she looked up. It was painted by his daughter. Silence. What? I turned the canvas over. Hidden beneath an old repair was a forgotten inscription. The woman's eyes filled with tears. My grandmother always said her mother painted. No one believed her. I gently handed the painting back. They should have. She cried quietly. Not because the painting was suddenly worth money. Because someone had finally taken her family's story seriously. As she left, Nathan whispered, I think this is why we're here. I nodded. So do I. That evening, I locked the workshop doors. For the first time in years, I didn't feel responsible for protecting an institution. Only a principal. The difference was lighter than I expected. Autumn arrived with cold mornings and crowded work tables. Word spread without advertising. Collectors came. Families came. Small regional museums came carrying forgotten boxes from dusty basements. No one skipped the process. Every object began the same way. Observation. Questions. Evidence. Only then conclusions. The order never changed. One afternoon, a black car stopped outside the atelier. Eleanor Whitmore stepped out alone. No photographers. No assistants. She carried a flat wooden case. Nathan looked toward me. I'll make tea. He disappeared into the small kitchen. Whitmore remained standing until I invited her to sit. I wasn't sure you'd see me. I wasn't sure either. She accepted the tea with both hands. I resigned. I heard. It was necessary. Yes. She looked around the workshop. Students compared pigments beneath bright lamps. An elderly volunteer carefully repaired a damaged frame. Someone laughed near the reference shelves. It feels. She searched for the word. Peaceful. It is. She smiled faintly. The museum never felt like this. It couldn't. Why not? Too many people were protecting appearances. She lowered her eyes. I was one of them. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, she opened the wooden case. Inside lay the leather sketchbook. The same one I had donated. Its conservation treatment was complete. The cracked spine had been stabilized. The pages carefully protected. The commission returned it. I know. They said it belongs to you. I looked at the notebook for a long moment, then gently pushed the case back toward her. It belongs to everyone. She looked confused. I donated it once. I won't take it back. Then where should it go? Not behind glass. She frowned. People should study it. Touch it. Question it. Learn from it. Her expression slowly softened. You still trust museums? I trust people willing to learn. She nodded quietly. I think I finally understand the difference. A month later, the commission announced the creation of an independent national archive for authentication research. Not controlled by a single museum. Not controlled by a single expert. Shared. Transparent. Every report publicly documented. Every revision permanently recorded. Commissioner Graves invited me to speak at the opening ceremony. I declined. Instead, I sent a handwritten note. Truth doesn't become stronger when spoken from a stage. It becomes stronger when anyone can examine it. They framed the note beside the entrance anyway. Nathan laughed when he saw the photograph. You avoided giving a speech. I tried. You failed. I usually do. Claire smiled. Some failures are useful. Late one evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone beneath the atelier's skylight. The old sketchbook rested on the table. Its pages no longer carried the weight of a secret, only the responsibility of memory. I carefully turned to the first page. The handwriting belonged to my grandfather. At the bottom of the margin, beneath decades of charcoal dust, was a sentence I had somehow never noticed. The purpose of knowing is not to be believed. It is to leave enough truth behind that belief becomes unnecessary. I closed the sketchbook gently. Outside, rain began to fall against the windows. For the first time in many years, I felt no urge to prove anything. There was only quiet work waiting for tomorrow. Winter settled over the city with a quiet confidence that reminded me of old paper. The open atelier had become too small, not because we sought fame, because honesty attracted people who had grown tired of certainty without evidence. Every work table was occupied. Students shared microscopes. Retired conservators debated varnish layers with university researchers. Families waited patiently beside wrapped paintings, faded letters, carved wooden panels, and forgotten sculptures. No one expected miracles, only answers. One snowy morning, Nathan placed a thick envelope on my desk. No return address. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single invitation. The International Council of Museums requests your attendance at the European Authentication Summit. A handwritten note rested beneath it. Professor Adrian Cole has requested to address the council before sentencing. He specifically asked that you be present. Nathan watched my expression. You don't have to go. I know. You've already moved on. I have. Then why are you thinking about it? I folded the letter again. Because unfinished conversations have a habit of becoming unfinished histories. The summit took place in Florence, the same city where the letter about my grandfather had originated. The old stone auditorium overlooked narrow streets that had survived centuries of wars, rulers, and revolutions. Inside, hundreds of museum directors, historians, conservators, insurers, and scholars filled the seats. No applause greeted Adrian Cole. No hostility either. Only silence. He walked more slowly than I remembered. His hair had turned noticeably gray. The confidence that had once filled every room now seemed too heavy for him to carry. The council chairman addressed the audience. Professor Cole requested this opportunity before the conclusion of legal proceedings. He stepped aside. Cole stood alone at the lectern. For nearly 30 seconds, he said nothing. Then he looked directly at me. I spent years believing reputation protected culture. His voice echoed through the hall. I was wrong. No one interrupted. I convinced myself that uncertainty was dangerous. He laughed quietly at himself. So I removed it. He lifted one of his old authentication reports. I stopped writing what I could prove. He placed it on the lectern. I began writing what powerful people wanted confirmed. The hall remained completely still. I never painted a forgery. He paused. But I made forgery respectable. Those words landed harder than any accusation. Because they were his, not mine. He continued. I blamed funding. I blamed pressure. I blamed trustees. I blamed collectors. Finally, he lowered his head. The truth is simpler. I enjoyed being the man nobody questioned. No cameras flashed. No reporters shouted. The confession needed no spectacle. It carried its own weight. After the session ended, people gathered in quiet conversations rather than loud debates. Several museum directors approached me. "We'd like you to advise our institutions. We're establishing new standards. We hope you'll lead them." I thanked each of them, then declined. One director looked genuinely confused. "Why refuse?" "Because systems shouldn't depend on one person." "But we trust you." I smiled. "That's exactly why I shouldn't become irreplaceable." Nathan, standing a few steps away, laughed under his breath. "They're disappointed. They'll survive. They're offering influence. I already have enough." "What is enough?" I looked through the tall windows toward Florence's winter rooftops. The ability to keep asking questions. As the conference emptied, a prison officer approached. "Mr. Rowan." "Yes." "He asked if you'd see him." Nathan looked at me. "You don't owe him anything." "I know." I followed the officer anyway. The interview room overlooked an inner courtyard where snow rested on ancient stone. Adrian Cole sat alone. No suit, no polished shoes, no audience, just a plain gray coat and a paper cup of untouched tea. When I entered, he stood automatically. Old habits. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, he gestured toward the empty chair. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wasn't sure either." He nodded. "Fair enough." Silence settled comfortably between us. Not friendly, not hostile, simply honest. He looked older without the armor of authority. "I've been thinking about something," he said. "What?" "The day you brought the sketchbook." I waited. "You already knew what I would do." "Yes." "You knew I'd dismiss it." "Yes." "You knew I'd try to hide the missing page." "I believed it was possible." He smiled sadly. "You never tried to stop me." "No." "Why?" I looked through the window before answering. "Because I couldn't teach you integrity." He closed his eyes. "I had to choose it." "Yes." "And I didn't." "No." He let out a long breath. "I hated you for staying calm." "I know." It felt like arrogance. It wasn't. What was it? "I stopped confusing your choices with my responsibility." He stared at me for a long time. "I don't think I understood that until now." The prison officer quietly announced that visiting time was nearly over. Cole reached into a small folder. "I can't keep these." He slid several handwritten pages across the table. "My notes." I didn't touch them. They belong to history now. I falsified parts of them. Then historians should know that. "You really won't take them?" "No." He laughed once. "You still refuse to rescue me." "I stopped rescuing people who preferred illusions." He nodded slowly. "I deserve that." "No." I stood. "You deserve the chance to choose differently." "And I wasted it." "Yes." For the first time since we'd met, there was nothing left to add. No final argument. No dramatic victory. Only consequences. I left the folder on the table and walked out. Spring returned. The open atelier moved into a larger building overlooking the river. The old warehouse became a training center for young conservators. Nathan directed the research program with the same quiet patience that had carried him through years of being overlooked. Claire established a public evidence archive where every investigation, successful or unsuccessful, could be studied by anyone. Children visited on school trips. They didn't ask which paintings were worth the most. They asked how people discovered the truth. Those were better questions. One afternoon, a young boy pointed toward the restored leather sketchbook displayed in a study room. "Who was the famous person who owned it?" I smiled. "No one famous." He looked puzzled. "Then why is it important?" I opened the protective case and carefully turned the first page so he could see the charcoal studies. Because someone cared more about getting it right than about being remembered. The boy studied the page for a long time. "I want to learn how to do that." Nathan looked at me and smiled. "So do we." Outside, sunlight reflected across the river, filling the workshop with warm light. Around us, conversations continued. Questions continued. Careful hands continued restoring forgotten pieces of history. No applause echoed through the room. None was needed. The greatest gift I had ever brought to a museum had never been the sketchbook. It had been the opportunity to choose truth over pride. Some accepted it. Some rejected it. In the end, the difference shaped every life that followed.